is CNN legal and national security analyst Asha Rangappa. She's a former FBI special agent and lectures at Yale University. Asha, I just want to start, the broader picture of this, what Whitney was just laying out, how intertwined the former chief of staff was in the events leading up to that day when before it kind of seems like it's these shadowy figures outside the White House. You're seeing just how close it was inside the West Wing as they were planning this.
Yes, Caitlin. I think what the resolution makes clear is that Mark Meadows was kind of the ground zero for a lot of the different threads that were leading up to January 6th. They know, for example, that he was receiving and sending messages related to the National Guard, as we just heard, and the delay in deploying them, and the fact that they were assigned, I guess, to protect the people who are at the ellipse, but also the efforts to weaponize DOJ in terms of calling into question election results, also in terms of being in touch with the rally organizers. So he has a lot of information to give. And Caitlin, what I'll add here is the resolution makes clear that the committee already has a lot of information. They have a picture here, and they have very, very specific lines of questioning for Mark Meadows, in which he'll have to name names and also provide the content of specific communications that he had with all of these people.
Well, and I'm wondering, what was your reaction to what we learned from this about the National Guard? The fact that Mark Meadows was saying that they would have the National Guard there to protect the pro-Trump people. I guess the question would be, protect them from whom, given they were the ones attacking the Capitol that day. But what other questions does this raise for you about how long it took to actually get the National Guard there?
Well, Caitlin, I would even rewind for one more loop. They actually contemplated the fact that the National Guard might be necessary. I mean, there's this building picture here that the idea that there would be some kind of big disruption on January 6th that might require a large law enforcement response, a National Guard response, tells us that they were anticipating something potentially violent, and that they were actually planning out, they were gaming out how how to make this benefit Trump. But it does shed light on the fact that the delay in the deployment of the National Guard, was not just some kind of miscommunication, which it sounds like, until now this has sort of been the narrative, but something that was more deliberate.
And what about this PowerPoint? I think this is something that everyone has been talking about. It is something that Mark Meadows turned over to the committee. His attorney said he just turned it over because it wasn't privileged. It was something he received but didn't do anything with. But this is deeply concerning because if you look at it, it's titled Election Fraud, Foreign Interference, and Options for January 6th. This was something that was sent to the chief of staff at the White House at the time. And of course, in part of it, it talks about declaring a national emergency when it comes to how they wanted to contest these results. And so Mark Meadows says he didn't actually do anything with this. But what did you read from the fact that he had this in his hands in the first place?
Yes, Caitlin, there is a lot of crazy in the PowerPoint, at least the version that's been circulating online. And I think what is striking about this is, again, that this was formalized. We've heard a lot of these conspiracy theories, sort of circulating about in different ways. This is compiled all together, and there was an intended audience for this. This was intended for everyone to get on the same page. And as you mentioned, there is a part in there about Trump declaring a national emergency. Now, Caitlin, declaring a national emergency triggers a lot of standby statutes that gives the president a lot of extra power. So I think the question is, what was going to be the precipitating event that would allow the president to do this? Again, I think Mark Meadows, even if he didn't create this PowerPoint, has a lot of answers to these questions.
We now have this new resolution they want to do a contempt of Congress charge against the former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who's no longer cooperating with the January 6th probe. And you saw overnight that there are these messages where he said that they were setting up for the National Guard to protect the pro-Trump people on January 6th. Of course, those were the people who were the ones attacking the Capitol. And so what stood out to you from this, of what we learned about just how intertwined Mark Meadows was in helping the former president with these efforts?
And he was receiving in email this extraordinary PowerPoint describing how to, essentially conduct a coup. The thing about Mark Meadows that I find so outrageous is that here's a guy who's writing a book about the events of January 6th, among other things, yet refusing to testify to Congress about the identical issues. Again, I think his legal position is weak, but the legal system moves slowly. And even if they pursue him for contempt, the odds that they will be able to use the legal system to force him to testify in any meaningful time period for this investigation, because, time is passing, I think is very low.
And when you talk to these officials and their associates on background and privately, they make that point. They say the longer this takes, the better it works out for us.
By the time you get to a district court, circuit court of appeals, possible Supreme Court, you can see with the Bannon case, which is basically on a slow boat to nowhere, that's where they're all going to be on that boat.